UnitedHealthcare, kind of the big news today. Foot Locker up 82%. Then UnitedHealth is down 15% on news that Medicaid could be getting investigated or is being investigated by the DOJ. And more so that could explain why the mysterious resignation of the CEO took place just a day before that. So he maybe had that news already. New Fortress Energy down 50%. Let's see what's happening to that. Looks like they had some bad numbers there. HIMSS and HERS down 2%. A lot of volatility. HIMSS was down, then up, then down. Not much in the up in the up section other than Cisco. Biohaven down 17. We're gonna have to look at that. Maybe start buying that. FDA delays decision on troriluzole. I don't think this drug is going to get approved. I don't want it to get approved. Almost. As long, of course, I do. But this drug doesn't. The portfolio is worth everything outside of that drug. Let's see. IVVD. They reported. Sounds like they were crying about a little weaker sales than expected. So they're saying they can still become profitable, but they definitely didn't become profitable this quarter. I think people expected, based on their talk, a much faster acceleration. Reddit down 7. Again, CoreWeave down 9 was surprising. By value, UNH has traded the most, $7 billion. The market's slipping a bit. A lot of people wondering when will we get back to a bear market regime. SPY down 40 basis points. Now that all the trade talk is basically over, what are we looking at? What is the market going to do? That's kind of the question. Earnings season's over. Earnings were, I think, pretty good. Troriluzole is just a bizarre drug. It's riluzole, which was a kind of a drug that never did anything. Somehow got approval for ALS, just because ALS is so rough. I think FDA had a heart. Same thing they've done with Sarepta. For whatever reason, they wanted to they wanted to make a prodrug of troriluzole or a derivative. And it just, they failed every time, and they're still trying to force an approval. I think both Cash App and PayPal are longs. You don't have to compare them. They're competitors, but they're functionally the same company. I didn't see that. They did a deal with Perplexity. That's cool. You guys don't worry about buying UnitedHealth. Like I said, you should be shorting it. Story at UNH is changing pretty quickly, but so far the CEO resigned mysteriously. They cut their guidance or abandoned their guidance. And then they're potentially being investigated by the DOJ for fraud. There's going to be, in a sentiment, an anti-insurance sentiment. We'll see how earnings go, I guess. The thing about insurance is people have tried to kill off this business. It's not insurance, managed care. People have tried to kill this business off for decades. I don't think the company is going to collapse, but it can go through a rough period. The biggest question is, so as I was saying, people have tried to kill off this business model, the managed care system for years, but it is how our country delivers healthcare. So the fears get high and then nothing changes. Eventually, the companies just keep reporting good earnings, and what can you do? All the fear subsides. But they're trading at pretty historically high multiples. Trump's kind of doing some of Bernie's stuff, but not really, because for pharma's most favored nation, that was a pro-pharma. What is a catalyst? What does that word mean? I wouldn't catch the falling knife of UNH. Everybody wants a dead cat bounce, but the stock market doesn't work like gravity. Just because something went down doesn't mean it's going to go up. Ask yourself is this a good business? Does Wall Street want to be involved in this? Wall Street hates uncertainty. And right now there's a whole lot of uncertainty. You might want to buy it at peak uncertainty, but I'm a value investor. I don't like to buy stocks unless I really believe they're very valuable relative to their current price. As a trader, you might want to wait till the fear's the highest, which is probably now. Yeah, I don't know what the word catalyst means. Yeah, it's about average, historically, I want to say. Managed care goes back a long way. The UNH convinced the world that managed care is a growth business. An event that makes the stock price move, like an earnings report. Well, every company has 4 earnings reports a year, and then every event is known to the whole marketplace. So is there going to be a surprise event that's not known to the marketplace that I know about? Not as far as I know. It'll go up and then it'll be so ephemeral, just fade right back down, which I suspect is going to be what happens here too. I'll look at Dawn right now for you, Schwab. Yeah, it's trading your cash. I mean, that's a pretty obvious buy there. Yeah, I mean, it's pretty good. I think it's pretty good. The cash is dropping a bit. What are they, 473 now? So 153 enterprise value, 100. I mean, it's one-time sales, basically. Yeah. So Dawn is pretty good. It's obviously I think the market is frustrated that they couldn't grow that fast here at just selling 30.5 in Q1, but that certainly doesn't mean that growth is over. Q1 is often a very weird quarter for pharma, where you will have a flat quarter even through a launch. That even happened to Lilly. So it doesn't mean Q2 can't be higher, but even if it stopped dead in its tracks, it's still one-time sales, which is obviously very cheap. So Dawn is pretty good. I know what you mean by when you say UNH died. It's a stock. The stock went down. They had a bunch of bad news. You can read the news. I'm short every quantum stock, and D-Wave is my biggest actually, but I'm pretty big in IonQ too. Yeah, one way to rationalize what's going on with these stocks is with super momentum stocks, traders get bored. They're in momentum stocks because they like the action. They want the action. So when the action's not there, they get bored and they sell. See HIMS right now. So if it can't keep rallying, they get out. So it's kind of like this weird. Buying momentum is like this daring thing, right? Like you're buying the top, hoping you get an even bigger top, right? So you're right, it's also baggy payday. So the paychecks hit, what are they buying? Let's test that theory. What else is a big baggy stock? Rocket Labs outperforming, okay. What else? Archer's up. Hood, AMC, GME, ŌCLA's a big one. Okay, yeah, it doesn't look like the thesis is right. So I don't know if the paycheck thesis works. Yeah. I don't think it's the paycheck. Yeah, it might be a day off. You gotta wait for it to clear. Well, of course, the privately held ones are better because the publicly held ones like IonQ had to SPAC to survive. They would have stayed private. Who wants to SPAC? You only SPAC when you have to. Yeah, so as I was saying, momentum is like one of these things where momentum can beget more momentum, but momentum buyers leave as well. They have to sell us at some point, right? So they're buying, hoping for a bigger, buyer, take them out. But it's also one of these things where, momentum can turn very quickly. Yeah, momentum can become anti-momentum very fast. I don't think quantum is the future, Joe. As we were reading Mike and Ike yesterday, even quantum people aren't sure what quantum's good for. So how could you say it's the future if you don't know what that future looks like? Yeah, I felt HIMS was a little too hot. It's a great company. I always thought it was a little too hot, but I also thought that $10 ago. So it still has not quite, I think I'm maybe breaking even on some part of it. I don't know if any of them are that fraudulent natty. I would say D-Wave is the shadiest, but so is IonQ. They're up in there. Rigetti's the most honest by far. So D-Wave and IonQ are shady in different ways. So D-Wave is shady because they're saying their stuff works and their customers love it, and obviously they don't. IonQ is shady because they're trying to meet their guidance through acquisitions. Yeah, I love Sarepta. Drug stocks are, they're just, it's such a tough sector. Like the biotech Twitter, for example, everyone's just moribund. Ken, I followed managed care as part of the early part of my career, and these stocks used to be 6 times earnings. Because they're not a growth business, right? You cannot grow in managed care because there's no new people in America, right? The population's not growing. So everyone's covered in insurance. There's no way to grow, right? There's only 3 big insurance companies left in America too now, managed care companies. So it's just a share game between 3 or 4 companies. There's no growth. There's a little bit of MLR growth, but the more, it's not MLR per se. There's inflation growth of healthcare costs. That makes them money. But, that's something that the government's now sitting there saying, why are we paying so much for medical care, medical goods? So, the bow might break at some point. I do think, I'm certainly brave enough to buy it. I mean, I have no fear in buying it, but Wnity leaving, it's very unclear why he left. He said personal reasons. Well, what they do, I mean, I'll explain the PE, how UNH works in a minute, but basically if they have a 15% MLR, which is basically their version of gross margin, revenue growth can lead to earnings growth, but it's pretty limited. But without inflation, because inflation is the only way they can have revenue growth, because the units are not going up, but the price is going up. So no volume increases for UNH. Yeah, the fraud investigation or news was probably the function of somebody doing some digging on why Whitty's leaving. I assume there'll be some Wall Street Journal article coming out at some point soon explaining what happened. People do utilize more healthcare over time. It's around 9 times earnings right now. So it's getting attractive. But what are the earnings, right? That's the question. Are the earnings going to change? Are we going to get a big shoe to drop on earnings? Yeah, UNH is massively bigger, okay? Massively bigger than any other health managed care company. So who knows what's going on there? Yeah, I love Sarepta. So somebody asked about Sarepta. They don't have any regulatory issues whatsoever. I mean, all their drugs are FDA approved, so they don't rely on FDA anymore. Yeah, I like Biohaven, but I don't know why the street cares about troriluzole. I don't think Sarepta can do a buyback. I'm sure they would love to. Very rarely Ivalo. And I mean, the new FDA guy has walked back so hardcore. And in fact, the new FDA guy has on his old Twitter, I don't know if you guys saw this. This is really funny. Check this out. These posts were issued before my FDA employment and do not necessarily represent the views of the FDA or the United States. The account is now inactive. So it's, they got to him. They got to him. The issue with Sarepta is nobody's pulling any drugs off the market. Stop it. The issue with Sarepta is the launch of their key medicine may be less than we thought, but it's still 2 times sales or less than 2 times sales. So it's a deep buy. I still have questions on UNH. I mean, what's going on? What is going on, basically? So you want to buy it not knowing what the answer to that is. Yeah, it could be like Apellis, but the problem with Apellis is they have no patents. And they only have one drug. And they don't have a pipeline. I don't know if UNH has shady practices or not, but the point is we want to know why the CEO resigned. We want to see a quarter of earnings, see if everything's real or not real. Is this still on track? Yeah, there are tons of risks to Sarepta like there are with any equity or security. You shouldn't over-concentrate in anything. I have it as a 5% position. So if it goes to 0, I can survive that. But if you've leveraged it or have call options, God forbid, on it or something like that, you're going to learn a lesson in risk management. Again, we don't know what growth is. If they're going to, earnings can drop 50%. We just don't know what's going to happen. It's probably going to be fine. I still think I can make 30% to 100% on the portfolio by year end. Yeah, I think the fear is that UnitedHealthcare's basic business model may be under siege at some point. No, I don't think anyone thinks QC could help high frequency trading. I mean, you always got to keep an eye on all the developments in technology. But yeah, I don't see it happening. Sarepta is my largest long. I don't know that quantum will impact cybersecurity too much. Working quantum will definitely force post-quantum cryptography, and the amount of systems that will actually migrate to PQC is probably going to be pretty limited. But you still need, it doesn't necessarily make hacking easy. Well, I think on D-Wave you can double down if you have a capital cushion. If doubling down means you're going from a 40% position to an 80% position, I'd caution against that. I've never liked troriluzole. Despite that, I like Biohaven. I don't know why Hood is down, sorry. Not every stock, I think this is one of the biggest things that beginners don't necessarily understand. There's not necessarily explanations for why stocks are up or down. The way computers do it, or the way a lot of people think about it, is as linear combinations of factors. So you have some coefficient, I guess we can do big letter A, And then you have some factor, we'll do alpha. And then the return can basically be explained by this linear combination, big letter B and beta. I'm mixing capitals and lower cases here for clarity. Big letter C and gamma. And so each of these are, the coefficient and the factor. The factor can be something like value, momentum, country, industry. There's hundreds of factors. And you do a linear combination of them, and the best fit of this linear combination will explain the change. News, of course, will do that too. Beta is a pretty big one. Let's use beta for beta. Yes, good idea. And what's left is called alpha, right? So you can't really explain everything, nor should you seek explanations all the time, right? You should have the conviction that your pick is a good pick, and that's it. Why is the stock up or down? If you want to really chase these things down, you can figure out that, this guy is selling the stock at this fund and he's moving the stock down. And then you go ask the guy and he just shrugs his shoulders and say, I just decided to get out. He's no smarter than you or me. I think it's priced in tofu. They said they could do 20%, as much as 20% down from Q1, but that's still, and then they think they can grow from there. That's still a huge drug. Want to look at a drug stock? Oh, let's look at Keros real quick, yeah. 1361. So let's look at Keros, tickers KROS. 40, that's 615, 414, 125. Yeah, I know they had the pericardial effusions, but I think that it's possible that, there's a couple of reasons to be hopeful on Keros. And I certainly just shutting it down and returning the cash is a high return. It's kind of a mediocre return. Yeah, the patent will run out, but I don't know how you make a generic to cell therapy. That's pretty tough. I just don't see how you could even compare that. In generics, you have to compare the drug to the other, the generic to the real drug. I don't know how you do that here. Only one way to look at a drug company, which is drug by drug. Cibotercept. I haven't looked at Pfizer in a minute. This is the same management team that built Acceleron, right? That built Acceleron. I'm happy that, when I'm down in a short and feeling pain, some of you guys have extra capital and you guys get the best execution on it. When you see me taking pain, that's when, you can get a really good deal. But I like being a little early. Better be early to the party than late. It's not that I like losing money. It's just that I don't believe you can time a short. If you could time entries and exits perfectly, I hate to tell you this, but you'd become a trillionaire. I don't even think it's not even about timing any direction, not just shorts, but longs, shorts, anything. Because there are trades that are obviously, look, D-Wave is obviously overvalued. It's obviously a scam. So by definition, timing is the only thing that matters. You know the direction, right? So when, some people have a market feel, so to speak. But even those people who I know and I've watched for a long time, they're not right a whole lot more than 50-50. Yeah, Andrew's got a good point. Beyond Meat was a good example of another company that was 100%, an obvious short. I hate to use the word scam, but I sometimes will use that synonymously. But I don't mean that they're a scam or a fraud. I just mean they're a good short. Beyond Meat, there's a whole number, of these obvious shorts. So theoretically, if somebody had market timing skill, which I kind of would agree with an academic almost, that it doesn't exist, one could short that breed of stock, the obvious shorts, and just make money all the time. And it's just not that simple. I think a lot of you guys have to just stop using options completely. They're sort of weapons of mass destruction. I had so many people in this chat saying, Martin, we should buy UNH, and I kept warning them away. So I suppose you're right. I didn't enter a short position, but you know what? I feel fine. I mean, if business does not change, UNH is relatively attractive right now, but we just don't know what's happening to the business. If you assume it hasn't changed, you'll get a 30% pop. It is, I'd rather miss out than to take the risk. So if nothing has changed at UNH, which seems like maybe that's not true, given the CEO resigned and, you know, there's this headline about fraud investigation. Now, managed care has been investigated for fraud, you know, since time immemorial. So I don't think that that's, you know, going to be a big deal. But if we wait for the next quarter, the stock will pop by then. If we buy now, we're taking the risk that business is fine, it's a gamble, and then it'll pop 30%, or business is not fine, and we could look at another 30% or 50% down. I assume business is fine. So you're probably going to be just fine buying it here, but it's like an 80-20 that you're okay. But you might have to have like it's not necessarily binary, by the way. UNH isn't that risky. You can take a decent sized position. UNH is not going to mess you up. Well, if there's fraud and this was what happened at Tenet Healthcare. Again, a lot of people don't have these memories, but I got blood memories of this stuff. Tenet Healthcare was one of the biggest hospital companies. Okay, they had a bunch of fraud where they were actually making a ton of profit on unnecessary surgeries. Okay, they had a set of doctors that would just order surgeries for patients. Like, oh, you got to have heart surgery, buddy. Patient didn't need it. They did the investigation because, you know, you make tons of money on those. It's the unknown unknowns. And patient didn't need the surgery. They were able to increase acuity, which is big in hospitals, bill the insurer, nobody was none the wiser. And it was an extra padding to earnings. And when that went away from earnings, you know, it kind of started a spiral of problems. We don't know look at Valiant. Valiant was doing great. And then Valiant had a distributor that it owned. And it was this very weird situation. And the house of cards kind of came tumbling down. So just be careful, you know. We don't know how UNH has done this amazing run of profits, you know, for the last decade. You know, if there's anything squirrely in there, Trump might sniff it out, right? Yeah, I'll go. There's a lot of words. I'll give you a funny story. There was a news article that I was under investigation, and I called the prosecutor the second I found the news investigation. I said, I want to know why I'm under investigation. I've done nothing wrong. And I said, am I under investigation? And there's I think 3 ways you could be under investigation. You're the subject or the target, or the main two. And if you're the target, that's bad. If you're a subject, you'd rather be a subject. But the problem here was that he said you're a subject, but you can always flip from being the subject to the target. So it's this very like, you know, you can kind of have a non-denial denial of like, well, we've never been told we're under investigation. But, you know, we were aware of subpoenas and all this stuff. Well, sometimes in an investigation, you're not supposed to be aware of it. Yeah, UNH has always outperformed Aetna and these other guys. And the question is, well, how? And, you know, I'm sure it's perfectly kosher, but, you know, I think a lot of the middlemen, you saw what Trump said about middlemen, right? Said, who are these middlemen? They make more money than everybody else.
Hey everyone, I'm Errol Barnett.
This was without a doubt one of the craziest speeches I've ever heard.
Same plant by the same company. It's the identical pill that I buy in New York. And here I'm paying $88 in London. We're going to cut out the middlemen and facilitate the direct sale of drugs at the most favored nation price.
All right, you've been watching.
That's when CBS got the message, cut it off. Cut it off.